Independent contractors versus employees. This comes up a lot. We hear a lot of our clients asking about this, usually in the context of, but I've said this person is an independent contractor for years. What do you mean I could be wrong? How do I deal with that? So we try to help them through that, and what I would like to do is make sure you guys know all the law on this so you aren't making those phone calls and aren't facing some liability down the road. So just as background, let's go over what is an employee versus an independent contractor. An employee is someone that works for your company, and when you have an employee, you pay workers' compensation for them. You have to pay them overtime if they are not salaried and otherwise exempt. You have to pay unemployment taxes for them. And the magic of independent contractors is that you don't have to do any of those things, which is part of why it's so attractive and people want to have independent contractors. Employees are the default, which means you as the employer have to work hard to prove that you have someone that's an independent contractor that's not an employee, and it is a pretty tricky burden. And we're going to talk about a bunch of different tests here, and none of them are easy. So what's the big deal? Why do I care about this? You care because Washington State in particular, and it has been historically federal as well, but Washington for sure is really scrutinizing this stuff. They are all over if you are properly classifying your employees and independent contractors. In fact, 2 years ago, the Department of Labor, the Federal Department of Labor, gave the Washington Employment Security Department money to hire 2 new employees for the sole purpose of auditing misclassifications. This isn't just, let's find out if you've done it wrong, a slap on the wrist and move on. These investigations can go back 3 years for all of your employees in all different departments. And if you are found to have misclassified, there are stiff penalties, back taxes, back wages, insurance premiums, penalties, interest. Compound that over 3 years. Multiple employees. This can be a really big deal, and it's something we do not want you to have to deal with. So how do you know if you're doing this right or not? Well, it is complicated. I mentioned that. There isn't one word, one phrase, one factor I can tell you that is going to be answering that question. There are a series of tests, and there are different tests that apply for different departments. There are different state agencies that use different tests. The worst part about this for employers is that you can pass one test and fail a different one. The IRS also has a test. There are federal tests. Today we're going to be talking about the Washington ones. They tend to be a little more restrictive, but just be aware that there's no one-size-fits-all. You've really got to know that there are multiple different tests out there. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the Department of Labor and Industries test. And this is the one I'll go through a little bit more in detail, and the rest will all be in your packet, so you've got it there. But because it's complicated, I just want to go through this one a little bit. 6 factors. So this is the Department of Labor's, I should say, it's enforced by it's the Washington Industrial Insurance Act, but it's enforced by the Department of Labor, and it's the one that people, I feel like, talk about the most. They actually have a pretty comprehensive website, and they have this handy-dandy independent contractor guide that is on their website. But if you flip through it, you will probably be amazed at some things that they say are employees, not independent contractors. So just beware that that is there as well. All right, factors. First one, free from direction and control. This one sure is vague and tricky. We're going to talk, I'm going to quiz you guys on this one in a couple minutes, but it is set up that way, so that way, you know, there is a little more discretion in what the department can say is appropriate control and how to classify people as employees. So beware of that one. Second is that service needs to be performed outside the usual course of business and or performed outside the place of business. You know, one of my favorite examples that's just easy to say is when you've got a worker or someone that you hire, let's say you are in a factory that sells peanut butter, and you hire a graphic designer to tweak your website so it looks more appealing and people really want to order your special service peanut butter. That person never shows up to the office. They work out of their own home. They work for lots of different clients, and they do this web design for all sorts of different companies. that person is meeting this so far that they're working outside of the business. They're not in the business of selling peanut butter. They're not coming to your office, so those are helpful factors. Third is they're customarily engaged in that business. And again, this is the web designer that's customarily engaged in that with their own business. Fourth, that they have to file their tax returns with the IRS. And this number 5 goes along with that, is that they have a UBI number for the Department of Revenue. This is not, a random person that you just hire off the street to do your work. This is someone that operates like an independent business. Number 6, maintaining your own separate books and records. Not just someone that says, oh, just pay me some money under the table. This is someone that is, or a company that you hire, that is an operating business. They probably have their own website. They have their own books and records. They have their own place of business. That's really where you want to be in looking at this. So I mentioned the independent contractor guide that the DOL has, and they have some examples in there of what can be independent contractors or employees. So I'm going to give you a couple examples, and I'm going to ask you if you think it's more likely an independent contractor or employee. The first one here. What if you have someone that is doing a job for you, you don't give them any training or equipment, they provide their own? What do you think? Is that more like an independent contractor? Show of hands. Yes, you guys are good. Yes, that is. You want someone to be bringing their own training and equipment. You don't want to be providing it for them. What about someone who they might have their own equipment, their own place, but they need to work with other company staff, and so they might come in to do that and interact with people in your business? Do you think that is an independent contractor? Could be. Could be. Employee. You guys are like on the fence with this one. I found this one to be pretty surprising. This guide says this exact phrase up here, and they say, oh, this is much more obviously an employee, which I don't think this one's obvious at all. So this is where it gets really tricky when you have an enforcement agency that says obviously employee and doesn't seem like that on its face. How about if you set the workers' hours or you keep track of their time? More like an employee? Yes, you are right. What about this one? You run a contracting business, you're a general contractor. Of course, you have a lot of subs that do a lot of different work for you. You want those subs to come attend your general contractor training. Do you think just attending that training alone changes it into employee, or do you think still independent contractor? How many? Wrong. Employee. Just attending the general trainings alone, according to the guide, says employee. What if you are working on a computer programming project? Oh gosh, the deadline's coming up. You need to hire someone to come in. They work there. They're from a totally separate company. You've got to get this deadline done. You pay them. What do you think? More like an employee? Show of hands. More like independent contractor? Show of hands. Employee. See, this stuff, I'm telling you, it's tricky. And you guys just thought that first test was tricky. The Employment Security Act test, which is enforced by the Employment Security Department, has not just one, but 2 different tests. This first test, this one's the easier one. It's only 3 factors long. These are pretty similar to what we talked about before. Free from direction and control, service outside the business, customarily engaged in this type of business. Second one is another 6-factor test. It's pretty similar to the one that we went through before, so I won't go through all of this, but just want you to be aware of the complexities out there. What about this one? This is one that the courts consider. Mostly talks about economic realities. This is Washington courts. Again, another 6-factor test. Man, they like a lot of factors. And I should say that these factors, it's not just, hey, meet one and be done. You've got to be meeting all of these things. And you'll note on this one, this isn't the same language we were looking at in the past 2. I don't see the magic phrase free from direction and control or the same language. It's different. There are different tests that apply for different agencies or different enforcement bodies in Washington, which is what makes this so challenging. We see a lot of mistakes out there, and I'm hoping you guys aren't doing these, but I'm going to share with you what we see so you know. The biggest one is when there is no contract. We're going to talk about what a contract needs to have, but that is a big one. Also, not having a UBI number. This comes up a lot when we have people that just want to hire someone for a short-term gig and you don't necessarily, they aren't in that business. This is a major red flag for agencies in Washington. If they don't have a UBI number, then it usually means they aren't in this business regularly and they aren't meeting those factors that we talked about. Non-compete. Oh, this one kills me every time. You want people to just work for you. You don't want them sharing all your good information by going out there in the industry you're in and spreading it around. This one is a deal killer. The whole point of independent contractors is that they should be out there working for other companies in your industry, in other industries, everywhere. If you have a non-compete saying that they can't do any of that, then you are in essence putting your arms around them and saying, you are mine, you can't go out there, and that's why the law says they are more like an employee. Oh, we see this one too. Someone, you say, you are an independent contractor, and then every time thereafter, you're calling an employee. You've seen this where the contract itself says employment agreement. You're an independent contractor. But if you're starting off with calling them an employee, or saying in emails, or including them with your employee mail list, that is a problem as well. This is another one we talked about with the no UBI number, but if you're hiring people that aren't acting like a business, that's going to be another big red flag. You want to hire a business, not Joe Schmo off the street that is going to look more like an employee. Again, you've got to meet all the requirements of all the tests. It's not pick and choose. They have these long lists of factors that need to be met, and it is all of them. And you have to look at all of those things. One of the things that's come up recently is, the Uber type issues, the gig economy. How do we deal with that when you want to hire people that, driving for Uber is probably not their full-time job. In fact, the vast majority, I read some statistics on this, the vast majority, it's a very, very minimal part-time job. For a very small percentage, it's a full-time thing. But these people can work for Uber, they can work for TaskRabbit, they can drive for Lyft, they don't even have to be in the driving industry if they're building your furniture for TaskRabbit, whatever it may be, they're out there doing a bunch of stuff. Are they employees or independent contractors? This is a nationwide legal battle right now. A couple of years ago, New York said, yes, Uber drivers are employees. In Washington, it's being battled out right now. Actually, last week, there was an argument up in the Ninth Circuit. It was more on whether they could be certified as a class or not. But the decisions haven't been made yet for us, but different courts are going different ways. So it's something to keep an eye out on. There have been some thoughts that, are we going to come up with a hybrid? Is there going to be a hybrid type of worker in between an employee and an independent contractor? What would that hybrid look like? How do we protect employee interests while protecting employers as well? So just be on the lookout for those types of things. It's just not clear-cut is really the problem. So what do you do? The thing you need to do is have a contract. Don't call it an employment agreement. Call it an independent contractor agreement, please. And in that contract, you want to say a few key things. Really what you want to do is say all of the elements of these various tests. Of course, you're going to want to follow in practice, but lay it out. Say, I have hired, Mike, Joe, Bob from such and such company, and he is free from direction and control. He has his own UBI number. It is blank. Go ahead, fill in that UBI number. This way, you're putting the person you're hiring on notice and obligation that whoever we're hiring, you need to have a UBI number, otherwise this isn't going to work, because guess what? You're going to be liable for a lot of back taxes and a lot of penalties you don't want. So put it right out there. This is what you need to have. So-and-so keeps their own books and records. They pay their own taxes. We will not be reimbursing their costs and expenses. They are responsible for those things all on their own. And they are, not operating in our peanut butter factory. They are working in their own web design company. They will be providing all of their own materials. Don't be providing these people materials. Say it in the contract, follow through. Have them bring all their own stuff, do all their own things. This is a good one. So a lot of times people hire what they like to think are independent contractors, but in reality, it's a very fluid, ongoing relationship. You pay them on the employee payment cycle, twice a month or every other week. You lump them right in. that starts looking a lot like an employment relationship. So you do want to make sure that you are limiting the job to either a fixed project or a fixed term. It's not just ongoing, a forever relationship. That the employee is paid differently than the employee payroll. For example, they submit an invoice, you respond to that invoice by payment within 30 days, something like that. You should say in there, and you are not entitled to any benefits. You are responsible for your own taxes. You also want to say that we are not providing you training. So remember, these are all the things we talked about in the factors, and if you're laying them out in the contract, whoever's doing the investigating will see, oh, you have said all these things that I wanted to find to be an employee. You've laid them out, and it looks more like an independent contractor. Of course, the non-compete issue, so you affirmatively want to say in there, you are free to work for other companies. So these are kind of the tips for how to go through it. It is complicated with all these factors, so anytime you have a category or a group of employees or a group of workers, sorry, that you want to call independent contractors, really do walk through the analysis, think it through. Don't hesitate to look at that independent contractor guide. It will scare you. You can always call us, of course, but do the mental exercise of walking it through because it is challenging. So that's it for me. Thank you guys. I'll be around. I'm happy to answer questions and talk through this anytime.